Be me. My name is Melinda. I'm 48 years old. I live in a large house in a quiet, respectable suburb, the kind of place people move to when they want good schools and manicured lawns. I'm a senior director of marketing strategy for a major tech firm. You've definitely heard of it. My salary is in the high six figures, not including the bonuses and stock options that make my accountant smile. I don't need a man. I've built my life on that principle. It was my mantra. 5 years ago, I finalized my divorce from my ex-husband. We were together for almost 15 years. College sweethearts. He was a good man, I guess. Kind, stable, dependable. He was a high school history teacher. He loved his job. That was the problem. He loved it. He had no ambition, no drive to climb any ladders. He was content. I always found contentment to be a synonym for stagnation. While I was chasing promotions, attending networking events, and flying across the country for conferences, he was grading papers and coaching the school's debate team. He wanted to start a family. He'd bring it up every few months, talk about converting the guest room into a nursery. I'd always have an excuse. Just let me land this next promotion. The timing isn't right with the Q4 product launch. Let's wait until we're more financially secure. We were already more financially secure than 99% of the population, thanks to my career trajectory. The truth is, I saw a child as an anchor that would drag my career to the bottom of the ocean. The arguments became more frequent. He felt like he was a supporting character in the movie of my life. He wasn't wrong. He accused me of valuing my title more than I valued him. He wasn't wrong about that either. The final straw was when he turned down a position to become a vice principal. He said he didn't want the administrative headaches. He loved being in the classroom with the students. I saw it as a catastrophic failure of ambition, a confirmation of everything I feared. I was hitched to a man who was happy standing still while I was trying to achieve escape velocity. I told him I wanted a divorce. He was devastated. He cried. I remember feeling nothing, just impatience. I hired the best lawyer my money could buy, a real predator in a $1,000 suit. She tore him apart on the stand, framed his contentment as laziness, his desire for a family as an attempt to trap me and hold me back. His stable, modest income was portrayed as a liability. I got everything. The house we'd bought together, the new car, the majority of our shared savings, the investment portfolio I'd built. He got his books, his old car, and a court order to find a new place to live within 30 days. My girlfriends and I went out for expensive cocktails to celebrate. I remember my friend Sarah, a partner at a law firm, raising her glass and saying, "To Melinda, proof that a woman is like a fish who needs a man like a bicycle needs a flat tire." We all laughed. I felt powerful. I felt like I had won. That feeling lasted for about 6 months. Then the quiet started to creep in. The house is a 4-bedroom colonial. It felt cavernous. Every footstep echoed. I tried to fill the silence. I bought a state-of-the-art sound system. I had podcasts playing constantly, but the silence was always there, waiting for the audio to stop. My social life revolved around those same girlfriends, successful, driven, and perpetually single, or in between divorces. Our weekly get-togethers, whether for brunch or wine nights, became a ritualistic airing of grievances. We'd complain about the dating pool, how men our age were chasing women half their age, how men in their 30s were emotional children looking for a replacement for their mother. We'd dissect the concept of toxic masculinity as if we were scholars. Men were too emotional. Men were not emotional enough. They were too competitive. They were not ambitious enough. They were too assertive. They were passive-aggressive. Every male trait was a symptom of a deeper pathology we were uniquely qualified to diagnose, but had no interest in treating. The men we actually dated were a revolving door of disappointments. They were intimidated by our success. This was our go-to explanation. It was a comforting lie that absolved us of any responsibility. It never occurred to us that maybe they weren't intimidated, but simply exhausted, that they didn't want to come home from their own demanding jobs to compete in a second shift of career talk and power dynamics. I spent a year on the dating apps. It was the most soul-crushing experience of my life. Endless swiping, crafting a profile that screamed successful and independent, but also fun and approachable. The dates were worse. Men who looked nothing like their 5-year-old photos. Men who spent the entire time talking about themselves. Men who clearly just wanted a hookup. And the few who seemed normal, the ones I'd go on a second or third date with, they'd eventually fade away. The ghosting was the worst part. The slow realization that you're just not a priority, that you're an option, easily discarded. I told myself it was their loss. I was a catch. I was successful. Any man would be lucky to have me. But late at night, alone in my king-sized bed, the confidence would evaporate. I was nearly 50. I was successful. And I was profoundly alone. This was my life. A cycle of high-stakes work, empty evenings, and cynical conversations with women who were just as miserable as I was. We were all captains of our own ships, sailing in circles in an empty ocean, congratulating each other on how well we were navigating. Then came the storm. It was late summer, maybe August or early September, the season for hurricanes. They were forecasting a big one, a Category 3 or 4. The news was non-stop coverage, people boarding up windows, long lines at the grocery stores. I felt a sense of detached amusement. My house was solid brick. I had a generator. I bought a few cases of expensive sparkling water and some gourmet cheeses. I was prepared. I viewed it as a minor inconvenience, a forced vacation where I'd have to work from home. The storm made landfall late on a Tuesday night. At first it was just heavy rain and wind. I was on a video call with my team, planning our next quarter's strategy, barely paying attention to the weather. Around 10 p.m., the power started to flicker. The wind began to howl. It wasn't a normal sound. It was a deep guttural roar that seemed to come from the earth itself. The lights went out for good. My generator kicked in, but the noise from outside was terrifying. It sounded like the world was being torn apart. I could hear things hitting the side of the house, branches, debris. I was in my living room, watching the trees in my yard bend completely horizontal through the window. Then I heard a sound I will never forget. It was a deep, splintering crack, not like a gunshot, but like a giant bone snapping. The entire house shuddered. It felt like an earthquake. A second later, there was a deafening explosion of sound from upstairs. It was a mix of shattering wood, falling drywall, and rushing wind. I screamed. I didn't even realize I was doing it. I ran up the stairs, my phone's flashlight beam bouncing wildly. The guest room, the one my ex had wanted to turn into a nursery, was destroyed. A massive oak tree, one of the oldest on the property, had fallen directly onto the roof. A huge limb, as thick as my body, had punched through the ceiling. Rain and wind were pouring into the room as if there was no roof at all. Insulation, wood splinters, and drywall dust coated everything. The smell of wet plaster and pine sap was overwhelming. I just stood there, in the doorway, completely frozen. All my success, my salary, my stock options, they were utterly useless in that moment. I was just a small, terrified woman, standing in a broken house in the middle of a hurricane. My illusion of control was shattered as completely as my roof. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world of devastation. My neighborhood looked like a war zone, trees down everywhere, power lines sagging, debris scattered across every lawn. My problem was immediate and severe. I had a hole the size of a small car in my roof. Every contractor, roofer, and handyman in a 100-mile radius was completely swamped. My insurance company's phone line was a permanent busy signal. I spent 2 days making calls, leaving voicemails, getting told it would be weeks, maybe months, before anyone could even come out to give me an estimate. Meanwhile, every time it rained, more water poured into my house, compounding the damage. I felt a level of helplessness I hadn't experienced since I was a child. My neighbor, an old retired man who usually just gave me polite nods, saw me standing in my yard, staring at the blue tarp I had pathetically tried to nail over the hole. He walked over. "That's a nasty bit of business," he said, pointing at the roof. I almost broke down right there. He gave me a piece of paper with a name and a number on it. "This is the guy you want. His name's Jesse. He's not cheap, and he doesn't do small jobs, but he's the best. He rebuilt half this neighborhood after the last big storm 10 years ago. He doesn't advertise, just word of mouth." I thanked him and called the number immediately. A man answered. "No, hello, this is just a flat." "Yeah?" I launched into my corporate spiel. "Hello, my name is Melinda. I was referred to you regarding some significant structural damage to my property. I'd like to schedule a consultation to assess the scope of the project and discuss a potential timeline for repairs." There was a pause on the other end. Then, "You got a hole in your roof?" I was a bit taken aback. "Yes, a very large one. Text me the address. I'll swing by this afternoon." Then he hung up. No confirmation, no pleasantries. It was jarringly efficient. A few hours later, an old but well-maintained pickup truck pulled into my driveway. Jesse got out. He was probably in his mid to late 30s. Not tall, but built solid. He had the kind of dense, functional muscle you get from actual labor, not from a gym. He was wearing worn-out jeans, work boots, and a plain gray t-shirt. He had a quiet, serious face and hands that looked like they could fix or break anything they touched. He just nodded at me and walked straight towards the damaged section of the house, his eyes already scanning the roofline, the fallen tree, the angle of impact. I followed him, trying to regain control of the situation. I was the client, the one in charge. So, as you can see, the primary point of impact was here. I've already contacted my insurance and they're processing the claim. What I'll need from you is a detailed, itemized quote, including materials and labor, so I can... He held up a hand, not even looking at me. His focus was entirely on the problem. I'll get up there and take a look. Then I'll tell you what's wrong and how much it'll cost to fix it. He walked back to his truck, pulled out a ladder, and had it against the house in seconds. He moved with an economy of motion that was mesmerizing. No wasted steps, no hesitation. He was on the roof for maybe 20 minutes. I could hear him walking around, pulling at shingles, measuring things. When he came down, he wiped his hands on his jeans. All right. The main limb cracked 2 of your roof trusses. All the decking in this section is shot. Your insulation is soaked. It'll need to be pulled out to prevent mold. It's a mess, but I've seen worse. He delivered this information like a doctor giving a diagnosis. Simple, direct facts. I can have my guys here on Thursday. We'll get the rest of the tree off, strip it down to the rafters, replace the trusses, and get it sealed up. Then we do the shingles. Inside work, drywall, insulation, paint. That's after it's watertight. I was still stuck in my project manager mindset. Okay, and what's the estimate for that? He named a price. It was high, very high. I must have flinched because he just shrugged. That's the price. I use the best materials, I pay my guys well, and I don't cut corners. You can probably find someone to do it cheaper. You can't find anyone to do it better. You let me know. He started walking back to his truck. There was no sales pitch, no negotiation. It was a take-it-or-leave-it offer. My entire career was built on negotiation, on leveraging my position to get what I wanted. But I had no leverage here. He had the skills, he had the solution. I just had the problem. For the first time in a long time, my money couldn't give me the upper hand. It could only, hopefully, buy me a solution from someone who knew what they were doing. Wait, I called out. I'll take it. Thursday is fine. He just nodded once, got in his truck, and drove away. I was left standing in my driveway feeling completely out of my element. I had just agreed to pay a small fortune to a man I'd spoken to for less than 5 minutes, and I felt like I was the one who had been granted a favor. It was a deeply unfamiliar feeling. Thursday morning at 7 a.m. sharp, Jesse's truck pulled up, followed by another one carrying 2 other men. They were a blur of coordinated activity. There was no morning huddle, no chit-chat over coffee. One guy was immediately on the roof with a chainsaw, sectioning the massive tree limb. The other was setting up ladders and hauling tools. Jesse was directing them with hand signals and 1- or 2-word commands. It was like watching a special forces team. I was working from my dining room table, trying to focus on a spreadsheet detailing market penetration in the Asia-Pacific region, but I couldn't concentrate. I kept watching them. The sounds were incredible. The roar of the chainsaw, the rhythmic thud of hammers, the scrape of shovels tearing off ruined shingles. It was the sound of order being violently imposed upon chaos. These men were physically changing my reality. They were fighting against the entropy that had invaded my home. And what was I doing? I was moving numbers around on a screen. I was crafting emails with phrases like leveraging synergistic assets and optimizing workflow paradigms. My work, which I had always seen as the pinnacle of importance, suddenly felt abstract and flimsy, bloodless. I felt a strange, creeping sense of inadequacy. I was the homeowner, the one paying the bills, but I was completely useless in this context. If I went out there to help, I would just be in the way. My contribution was to sign a check. Their contribution was skill, strength, and courage, standing on a steep, damaged roof, wielding dangerous tools. For the next few days, this was my routine. I'd work, and I'd watch them. Jesse was always the first to arrive and the last to leave. He worked harder than any of them. He was hauling lumber, operating machinery, his face set in a permanent expression of focused concentration. I tried to make small talk with him a few times during their short breaks. "Looks like it's coming along well," I'd say, using my best manager voice. He'd just nod, taking a long drink of water. "It's a job." He wasn't unfriendly, just detached. He wasn't there to make friends. He was there to solve a complex physical problem. My world was about pleasing people, managing perceptions, and navigating office politics. His was about trusses, load-bearing walls, and watertight seals. His reality was governed by physics, not opinions. The pivotal moment, the one that changed everything, happened about a week into the project. It was a hot afternoon. The crew was working on framing the new roof structure. The sound of nail guns echoed through the neighborhood. Around lunchtime, a modest, slightly older sedan pulled into my driveway. A young woman got out of the driver's seat. This was Kathy. She was probably in her mid-20s. She wasn't wearing designer clothes or a lot of makeup. Just jeans, a simple top, and a genuine warm smile. She was carrying a large cooler bag. She waved to Jesse, who was on the roof. He saw her, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw the focused mask on his face relax. A real, unguarded smile appeared. He said something to his crew and then climbed down the ladder with an agility that was still surprising to me. She met him by his truck. She opened the cooler and pulled out containers of food, a large thermos, and a couple of cold drinks. They didn't say much. He just sat on the tailgate of his truck, and she sat next to him while he ate. She'd point to a spot of dirt on his face and wipe it away. She refilled his drink without him having to ask. It was a quiet, seamless dance of care and attention. I was watching this from my kitchen window, and I felt a pang of something I couldn't quite name. I decided to go out. I think I wanted to assert my position, to remind them they were on my property. I walked over with a bright, artificial smile. "It's so nice of you to bring him lunch," I said to her, my tone a little too patronizing. My ex-husband used to joke that his greatest culinary achievement was not burning water. I expected a polite laugh, a moment of female camaraderie at the expense of male incompetence. But Kathy didn't laugh. She looked at me, then at Jesse, who was methodically eating his lunch, and her expression was serious. "He was up at dawn to load the truck with lumber," she said, her voice calm and even. "He spends 10 hours a day in the hot sun, doing dangerous work, rebuilding your home. The least I can do is make sure he has a decent meal to eat." The words hung in the air. There was no malice in her tone, but it was a clear and devastating rebuke. She wasn't his assistant. She wasn't his servant. She was his support. He was out in the world, wrestling with its harsh physical realities. He was building things, fixing things, fighting against decay, and she was his sanctuary. The person who made sure he was rested, fed, and cared for, so he could get up the next day and do it all again. Jesse put his arm around her and gave her a squeeze. He looked at her with a kind of quiet gratitude that was more eloquent than 1,000 words. He then looked over at me, his expression unreadable, and said, "She takes good care of me." I suddenly saw my entire life's philosophy crumble into dust. I had spent decades competing with men. I wanted to be in the boardroom. I wanted the bigger salary, the more important title. I saw relationships as a power struggle, a negotiation. I saw Kathy, and I realized I had been fighting the wrong war. She wasn't competing with Jesse. She was completing a circuit with him. He provided strength, security, and order. She provided comfort, peace, and support. Together, they were a self-sustaining unit, vastly more powerful and resilient than either of them could be alone. I had won my divorce. I had my big house, my important job. I had my independence. And in that moment, I would have traded all of it, every last stock option and performance bonus, to have someone look at me the way Jesse looked at Kathy. I mumbled something about having to take a call and retreated back into my house, my cheeks burning with shame. A few days later, the job was done. The roof was perfect. The room was repaired, painted, and looked better than it had before the storm. The house was secure and quiet again. Jesse did a final walkthrough with me. He pointed out the new flashing, the warranty on the shingles, the upgraded ventilation. He was a master of his craft. I wrote him the final check, adding a very generous tip. He looked at the amount, raised an eyebrow slightly, and then just gave a single, respectful nod. Appreciate it. This'll go a long way towards the down payment. Oh, are you buying a place? I asked, trying to sound casual. Yeah, he said, folding the check and putting it in his pocket. Me and Kathy, we're closing on a little house over in the next town. Our house, not his house, our house. He shook my hand. His grip was firm and dry. You have any other problems? You know who to call? And then he was gone. That night, I had my weekly video call with my girlfriends. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had realized. I tried to put it into words for them. I think we've been looking at things all wrong, I started. What are you talking about, Melinda? Sarah asked, swirling a glass of red wine. This man who fixed my house, he's a provider, not just of money, but of real, tangible security. And his girlfriend, she's not weak or dependent. She's his partner in a different way. She provides the peace and support that lets him go out and do what he does. I continued, the words tumbling out. We're all trying so hard to be the warrior and the king. We've forgotten that there's immense power and value in being the safe harbor the warrior comes home to. We're not in competition with men. We're supposed to be the other half of the equation. There was a dead silence on the call. Then Sarah started to laugh, a loud, dismissive cackle. Oh, honey, you've been breathing in too much drywall dust. That is the most pathetic anti-feminist thing I have ever heard. She's a glorified maid, and you're romanticizing it. Another friend chimed in. Seriously, Melinda, that sounds like something my grandmother would say. We've worked too hard to go back to that. They didn't see it. They couldn't. Their entire identity was built on the foundation I was now questioning. To them, what I was saying was heresy. It was a betrayal of everything we'd supposedly fought for. I saw them for what they were in that moment. A chorus of lonely, angry women, reinforcing each other's bad decisions and cheering each other on as we marched deeper into a barren wasteland of our own making. I told them I wasn't feeling well and ended the call. So, here I am. I'm sitting in my perfect silent house, the house I won. It's not a home, it's a monument to my ambition, a beautifully decorated museum of my success. I achieved everything I ever wanted. I have power, money, and independence, and I am desperately, profoundly lonely. I spent my entire adult life trying to prove I didn't need a man. I was wrong, I needed one. Just not in the way I thought. I didn't need him to pay my bills or give me a title. I needed his quiet strength to balance my frantic energy. I needed his connection to the real, physical world to ground my abstract corporate existence. I needed a partner to build a life with, not a competitor to be vanquished. The greatest value a woman offers a good man isn't her salary or her title. It's peace. It's a refuge from the battles he fights every day. It's the calm in the eye of the storm. I destroyed a good man who tried to give me that because I was too arrogant and foolish to understand its worth. Now, I'm almost 50, and I'm finally understanding. I'm telling you this so you don't make the same mistake I did.